Hi everyone, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Gabriel, and welcome back to Astrologically Speaking, episode 3. I hope everyone's feeling great and fine.
I wanted to just preface before we jump into today's episode proper. This will be quite interesting. Today's the first time I think that we will see a lot more discussion around what might be, I wouldn't say outright disagreement, but what our points of
Five. Yeah, that'll be the kind lah.
what kind of points of view we have on certain aspects. And today's will be quite a prickly topic as well, because we're going to be covering generational astrology. But before we jump into generational astrology, we wanted to revisit one of the points that we raised in a previous episode regarding a particular prediction that one of us made.
Okay, you can see my face. My face is a little bit, Yeah. Well, so in episode 1, I made this declaration. Probably this Uranus squaring Singapore's sun sign has to do with a change in leadership. Okay. However, I don't think that it's going to be anyone that we expect. Meaning that, I don't think it's going to be Lawrence Wong. I don't think it's going to be Ong Ye Kong. And of course, I'm wrong because Lawrence Wong is now the next in line. Now, I think everyone is trying to flesh him out as who is this new PM? Who is he about? And I think even other news sources are trying to, actually do a little profile on him about who is the next Singapore PM. It turns out that I am, oh God, I hate saying this. I am wrong. Okay, fine. So yeah. But in my defense, it's still very early. Okay, maybe something will change later. We don't know. So we'll see lah.
Yeah. To be fair, when we were talking about this, the nature of Uranus is that it is predictably unpredictable. So what we're seeing now might be like the surface level expectations, and then we might see some exciting developments as we get closer to our general election. I'm still quite excited to see how Uranus would affect our country going forward in terms of monetary policy developments and but yeah, let's keep an eye out.
After I found out that Mr. Lawrence Wong is going to be the next PM, of course I'm a bit but at the same time, because I think for me, one of the things that I wanted to be very clear about is to see, how his chart is aligned with Singapore's chart, right? I mean, that's me being me lah. So I actually snooped around a little bit, found his birth dates. There's no birth time. And I'm seeing some interesting development for his chart. If anything, his chart does suggest that he's probably going to be heading towards some big mega changes in his life. There is for those of you out there who knows a bit of astrology, his sun, his identity is going to go through a mega Neptune transit. So he's going to feel like a victim or savior type. And interestingly, he has a moon in Taurus, because we don't know his birth time, it may or may not be in Taurus. Given that Singapore has a Uranus transit from Taurus, it's very likely that Mr. Lawrence Wong have Uranus in Taurus, moon in Taurus. So that, he would literally be the Uranus transit for Singapore lah. Uranus is predictably unpredictable, and I definitely agree on that. So I'm looking forward to seeing him to take the helm. I'm personally quite happy because I live in his constituency, so he's literally my MP. So I'm gonna see more glitz and more nice glamorized kind of a building around my area. Maybe there'll be a lot of free upgrades. So don't know.
So let's earmark that and revisit it in the second or episode down the road. What we wanted to discuss was also related to Lawrence Wong and also related to his journey to become the PM, supposedly. And one of the things that he would have to face is his appeal or the way that he reaches out to Generation Z.
One of the things that we talked about was how the PAP is going to be challenged in the next election, because now we're gonna have a new batch of eligible voters, and they are the Gen Zs. So Gen Z will pose a significant challenge to the ruling party, and one of it is because it is in certain people's opinion, okay, mine included, that the Gen Zs are all about tearing down existing power structure, existing establishments in order to create their own, right? So I read this article from the Rolling Stones in 2020 about the difference between Gen Z and Gen Y, which is the millennials, which is me and Cliff lah. And one of the things that they posit is that Gen Zs are more willing to tear down the whole institution, and what they assert is that Gen Ys, we the millennials, are the ones that are going to preserve, that institution, that we have no qualms about going into institutions to create changes from within. And one of the things that we thought it would be interesting to talk about would be, can astrology give us some clue about how the different generations behave?
So let's talk about Gen Z from the perspective of a couple of old Gen Ys, elder millennials.
Hey, wait, I'm not elder millennial. Okay, I'm quite elder. Okay, fine. I think 89 is considered elder millennial.
Anything with an 8 in front is an elder.
But yes, okay, fine. Yeah. I agree that I'm a elder millennial, fine. Even though I'm the youngest of the elder millennials, but sure, okay. Yeah, so how do we go about this? Maybe I'll just share some of my fondest memories of working with my Gen Z kids. I mean, they use very woke language lah, like yeet and
how is yeet woke?
I don't know, like they use very internety kind of slang, I thought lol was like quite hip, right? But it's not hip anymore,
No, it's cringe.
Yeah, but that's what I know. So yeah lah, whatever. Like some of the stuff that they say, right? I need to watch the show in order to know what they're talking about. The idea of like what's popular is no longer American centric. It includes it has now included other forms of media that's from Korea, from other countries as well. I mean, I only know Korea lah. Maybe they have other countries that they are interested in and I don't know of. So that's very interesting for me. And the other thing that I remembered was that I was having drama class and Pink Dot just happened, right? And that time I wasn't out to my kids yet. And then they were so excited so apparently they went to Pink Dot, right? And they were very excited to show me how the Pink Dot video captured a footage of them doing like a high, waving their hands to the camera for like 3 seconds. They were very excited to show me, and they were like, so like, oh my God, we're in it. They were so excited about it, right? I felt really proud, because I'm very into the whole liberal left ideas of LGBTQ, the socialist ideals lah. I mean, those ideas that's a little bit more liberal. So I'm very, very proud of my kids, that they care about such things, And subsequently, like they also talk about environment, they care about environment, they want to make a contribution to the environment. So all these things are just really, really interesting for me, Like this is my experience of Gen Z. Like my experience of them, like if I sum up in like one word, is that they are very woke lah. I would say woke is the word lah.
My personal experiences with them, interacting with them online and in person, has been that they, like what you mentioned, it's very current, it's very contextual as well. You're expected to keep up with a lot of the trends, and the very nature of that creates a very decentralized pool of trends. It's not just one trend. So I would probably slightly disagree with what you're saying about everything is Korean centric. It's not centric. There are many different tribes, and they hang out not on one platform. Like when it was our time, there was no platform to go to except Facebook, eventually Instagram. Now it's TikTok, Discord, Twitch, so on and so forth, right? There's so many options out there. And another thing that I really appreciate also is their sense of humor. It's very ironic. And to be able to grasp irony is like a next level of abstraction. And so that's not something that a lot of the other generations that are grounded in material and concrete logic flows would easily catch on. So what was cool one day might be cringe the next. They are quite disruptive, the same way that we, Gen Y, were disruptive when we first entered the workforce. It's really annoying. And now I understand how the Gen X people felt when I first joined the company. Like, why? Why do we have to do this? But why? Why? And now the questions instead of why is, why aren't you doing this? What's the bigger benefit for society? What's the big picture good that we're doing? When we're trying to hire, the thing that I'm noticing, and just to caveat again, I'm noticing this from a point of privilege as well, because I'm working in big tech. The kind of candidates that we get in are of a certain caliber. They have had the resources to go through, the kind of training that makes them attractive to big tech companies. Is like, why then should I join your company? What is it that you're doing to help further humanity, protect underrepresented groups, protect and conserve the environment? And so now the narrative has been very much on what's the greater good that we're focused on. It's my experience of Gen Z, and not to discredit your experiences. So I do see that bubbling up once in a while. But yeah, if there's one stark thing though, it's the lack of human interaction at work. It's all digital now.
I wanna caveat and say that probably my lack of human interaction, because I teach drama, right? So the kids are expected to be very good at human interaction, right? So probably like I don't see that I don't see much of that. I think they're okay. I don't think they're bad at human interaction. I do see that they prefer to be on their phones, right? But I don't see that they are bad at human interaction. I also want to add on to what you said about the humor that they have, right, which is very ironic, right? Some would even go on and say that their humor is quite nihilistic.
Yep.
Right, like I remember, I think for a while there was this Tide Pod kind of humor where.
Should we define nihilistic?
Okay, nihilistic is like this sense of like the world has no meaning.
What's the point?
Yeah, what's the point, right? There's a sense of hopelessness in that, and I've done some research, and one of the things that they say is that because the Gen Zs are hyper plugged into the internet, into the social network and all that, right? They're literally drenched in pools of news all the time. Snapchat and there's TikTok, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, and since the early 2000s, since the mid 2000s, in my JC time, like people were already like documenting political incidents, big movements, using the phone, and they just blast it out to the internet, and everyone get to see like live, all this like micro reporting of like what's going on the ground, which state media sometimes don't cover, right? So imagine, you are born in that society, you're born, when the digital age is so advanced that you see this all the time. It's like I'm hyper plugged into everyone everywhere, but at the same time, I am also incredibly lonely because there's no real person, right? The person that I know exists in video, exists in words, exists in the things that they say, either on internet forums, or on the post that they created. And I think it's very, in some way, it's like the connection, the real human connection that you have with someone is like, extremely mediated and cut off. So I can see how isolating that can be and how that can lead to some kind of nihilism.
To expand on nihilism or nihilism in the workplace for Gen Z, based on personal experience, also that sense of helplessness with the democratization of access to economic opportunity, meaning almost everyone can get access to proper education for a reduced cost, and you get diversity quotas and things like that. So it's a lot easier to be able to get a spot at the more coveted companies, right? Competition has become impossibly more difficult during versus our time. But one thing I want to also elaborate a little bit on what you're mentioning about how everyone's more hyper aware or plugged into a constant stream of news. There's a war here, there's a famine there, there's a drought here. That's not necessarily different from anyone that actually is living through a near constant, like 20-year war, for example. We know some areas of conflict in the world that this is a lived reality. However, a lot of the actual trauma is now transmitted virtually and consumed as vicarious trauma by literally everyone, and more so Gen Z. So while we're physically safe in most instances, there's a shared empathy and a shared experience of that kind of trauma. So the world has become more interconnected yet disconnected at the same time. But I think that's a good elaboration on our personal experiences. Do we want to bring the lens of astrology into it?
Yeah. Before I do that, I wanna just I mean, I want to. I don't say I want to disagree, but I want to counterpoint a little bit on that. That even though we went through a time when the Iraq War is like constantly all the time for like it only just ended like this year, right? Even though we went through that, I think what's really different for the Gen Z is that they are plugged. There's like a climate crisis everywhere, and previously I think crisis for our generation, even though we know that there's some news all the time, it was very isolated. At least in my perspective, it felt like it was very isolated to specific areas, But now there's like, now you see, like you scroll YouTube, right? Suddenly got advertisement from the UNHCR telling you that, oh, Syria has a crisis, they need donations, and then, the Israeli crisis, and then this crisis and that crisis.
Yep. Our experience of crisis has usually been positive, like we are winning, we are the good guys. And now it's a endless, it's not black and white anymore. Like who really is the good guy? It's more prevalent. So I agree with you on that point. And also I think like established world powers were never outright challenged until 2001. The 9/11 attacks, and that's like right bang in the middle of Gen Z Generation Z really, as they were coming up. So I'm just looking at one of the articles by McKinsey, and one of the keywords that they're using is multiple realities. It's very unlimited. There's a lot of facets to who Gen Z is. And talking about facets also, like there is greater acceptance and greater readiness to discuss gender identity on a spectrum rather than a he, she. It is no longer just they, them as well, but how do you self-identify? And there's so many options. It's up to you. Rather than back in us, are you in or are you out of the closet?
Yeah, so I think definitely, I definitely see that as well. I think one of the articles that we referenced, right, that when we were doing, when we were preparing for this podcast, is this article from McKinsey.com. We will include this in the video description. Probably. So. And one of the things they talk about is how they are aware of this importance to understand different truth. They are more able to sort of balance out between like, I have to embrace the institution and then accept everything from the institutions. They're more able to sort of say that, okay, embrace the institution and then at the same time don't abandon the values that I have personally for me. So I think these are very interesting points. I mean, one of the things that, when I read all these things, right, one of the things I tell myself is that Gen Zs are the one that's going to save the world. Okay, so back to our discussion on Gen Zs, astrologically speaking, what's going on for them. So generally speaking, if you have listened to this podcast for a while, you would have known that astrology is not just your sun sign. It's not saying you're Cancer means you're Cancer. We look at the totality of your birth chart, which means we look at all the 9 planets in the sky, excluding Earth, right? And one of the markers that astrologers use to look at the different generations are the planet that's very, very far away because they move very, very slowly. And therefore, we see that they sort of demarcate the generations quite well, okay? And therefore, we are talking about planets like Pluto and Neptune, and maybe even Uranus as well. Astrologers, we like to call them the outer planets or the generational planets. For Gen Z, something that they have would be Pluto in the sign of Sagittarius and Neptune in the sign of Aquarius. So maybe for the purpose of this podcast, we'll just ignore Uranus.
Yeah.
We will just talk about the Pluto in Sag and Neptune in Aquarius. So we need to compare this with the Gen Y, which is the Pluto in Scorpio and the Neptune in Capricorn, and sometimes also Neptune in Sagittarius. Because I think the planets are very, very different.
Okay, so let me summarize again. For the purposes of this discussion, we are defining Generation Z as the generation that was born when Pluto was in the sign of Sagittarius and Neptune was in the sign of Aquarius. To contrast that, Generation Y, our generation, the one that just came before, is the people that were born when Pluto was in the sign of Scorpio and Neptune is in the sign of Capricorn and a little bit of Sagittarius as well. So there's no clear what date to what date because planets move forward and then they move back. But very broadly speaking, these are the brackets.
Very broadly speaking, what would be the dates you think?
I'm looking at it right here. So between 1984 to 1995 would be Gen Y, and then 1995 all the way through to 2008 would be Gen Z.
Actually, I would include the 1981, 82 to be Gen Y also lah. Because some of them have like a Pluto, like at the end of Libra, moving towards Scorpio. Okay.
More complex shades of color lah, but yes, they will be included as well.
So let's talk about maybe let's talk about Pluto first. Pluto is a planet of unearthing, right? Of unearthing, of power struggle, power and powerlessness. And usually in a generation, it will sort of like inform this thing that that particular generation is obsessive about. So for Gen Y, which is the batch of us with Pluto in Scorpio, we are obsessing about trying to get to the bottom of things. Sometimes getting to the bottom of things can mean things like the occult, psychology, the trauma kind of stuff, the things that motivate people. Right, the little takes that motivate us. So I think that's what the Pluto in Scorpio generation sort of get really, really obsessed about. And I think that for a while ago, there were a couple of articles talking about how the millennials are very into psychology, very into astrology, right? And one of the things that I would say would be the cause of that would be the Pluto in Scorpio, because it's all about getting to the bottom of things, getting to know the really deep thing that sort of like drives all of us.
Piercing the veil.
Yeah, like the High Priestess card lah, some of you, if you're familiar with tarot archetype, it's like the High Priestess card, trying to peer beyond the veil.
And probing deep and all that. And I think also, just to add a layer of complexity because I'm a Scorpio, to make things more complicated, because why not? It's important to also, when we are making these comparisons, Gen Y versus Gen Z, it's also important to remember where each generation is at their life stage right now. So Gen Y is now approaching
Don't say 40s, don't say 40s, don't say 40s.
30s, 40s, where I was brought up in a work environment where the ongoing narrative was you need to make it by age 40. If not, that's it. You're done.
Yeah. Actually, I have a different narrative, like mine is more like you need to make it by age 30.
Well, yeah, but I didn't make it by 30, so I moved it back by 10 years.
Sad.
But yeah. So it's very concrete, very like based on if you don't make it, you're washed out, you're dead, you're gone. It's very about survival. It's about security as well, which is a Scorpio keyword. And because of where we are at our stage of life when we are starting to have family, some of us, I was just having this conversation with a very long time and close friend. And we were talking about how we finally, both of us individually, on our own, we didn't discuss this, found the strength to stand up to our own parents, our own fathers. And that made me think about generational trauma. The whole generational trauma thing really started getting traction because of a couple of Gen Y speakers. And some of our colleagues as well have chosen to specialize in dealing with trauma. And that links with what you said earlier on how a lot of us were curious about psychology, astrology, and a lot of the spiritual arts because there's a lot of that unpacking. Well, I'm not sure how I feel about that word, but because it's been overused, but unpacking of deep and complex emotions, which is again very Scorpio. Yeah, Pluto and Scorpio. So that's defining Gen Y and looking at context on where we are on our life journey.
This is particularly about Pluto in Scorpio, and we need to talk about sex as well, because Pluto in Scorpio, right? Sex, right? So I think our generation has a major sexualization in things. I don't know, is it really necessarily our generation? I don't think so, right?
There's a lot of fetishization or discussion of fetishization of a lot of things and races and people. And now we are also consciously, I don't think we are leading it. I really don't know. I'm not qualified to discuss this, but from my impression, as part of our decolonialization process, we are really investigating the fetishization of a lot of things in our, culture. I'm speaking from an Asian perspective.
Yeah, why Pluto in Scorpio fetishization? Oh, because sex. Right. I was slow for a moment there. So I definitely resonate with that. I think this generation is about revealing, unearthing, and really like purging out what is hidden and sort of like bringing it out in the open, which is the Pluto in Scorpio thing to do. And then the other thing that this generation, the Gen Ys have is Neptune in Capricorn and even Neptune in Sagittarius. So Neptune in Sagittarius and Neptune in Capricorn a little bit different. How do you want to go about this? You want to talk about Neptune in Capricorn or Neptune in Sagittarius?
Neptune in Capricorn is basically you need to make it by 30, 35. If not, you never made it.
Yeah, so it's the idealization of the Capricorn. Okay, the Capricornian values are this idea of like making it. I need to make it. And yeah, I can talk about the Capricorn thing the whole day because like I have a lot of Capricorn generational trauma in me. But essentially with Neptune in Capricorn, most of us idealize this idea of success. This idea of like
idealize the idea of success. Yes, that's beautiful.
It's that sense of like not just idealizing it, but also giving it so much weight, right? That it
takes over.
Yeah, and it's inherently disappointing. I speak from experience. So
when I started my career, I was in recruitment, and I was recruiting for banking and financial services. And one of the benchmarks that we had, if you're in investment banking, was every year you needed to increase your salary by 1,000 per month. So the target was by your 10th year of working, you needed to draw a minimum of $10,000. After that, it really depends on your function and stuff like that. So basically, we even have benchmarks that is very grounded in material standards that can be accounted for.
Which is a very Capricorn thing, yeah.
Yes, correct.
What I reflect deeply in myself, there is an ultimate sort of like a idealization with regards to existing structures, existing standards, of what it means to make it. And then feeling like it's not gonna happen at the end. I remember like when I was growing up, I idolized the structure and authority of established hierarchy. Like if someone do something wrong, the police will come and catch. The good person, the good people will prevail one way or another, because there's justice in the world. The system takes care of everyone, and Neptune in Capricorn, Neptune being this energy of disappointment in the sign of Capricorn, what you get disappointed by is inherently structures itself, like existing structures and existing hierarchies. And that could possibly be why people of our generation, they want to go inside the structure and change the structure for the better because they still believe in the structure.
I feel very called out. What I'm trying to do right now on a global level is to actually build a robust diversity, equity, and inclusion program and then roll it out globally because there is so much room for that. And I personally believe that's important. And I guess like what you're saying, like Neptune is also about the savior complex. I'm trying to build something that will save these underrepresented groups. So not completely altruistic, but indicative of this generation's motivations.
I definitely resonate with that. This whole idealization of structures. So the next thing we want to talk about is Gen Z and the difference in the placement. So for Gen Zs, they have Pluto in Sagittarius, right? And like we say, Pluto is this energy that we are obsessed about. That we want to, it's a digging energy. For us, what is the thing that generation is trying to dig? And in Sagittarius, it's inherently about truth. It's very interesting because I remember very clearly that Gen Zs are born in a time when religious fundamentalism is becoming a thing. Because after 9/11, the world really changed. Suddenly, Islamophobia is real, and then then there's a rise of the evangelical Christians. I think they have been around all the time, but I think it was in the 2000s when a lot of your friends go to City Harvest Church. A lot of my friends go to City Harvest Church. And they try to bring us along, and they try to. There's that sense of like evangelizing, and that's the period. Like the Gen Zs are born in the period where this idea of truth is very, very important, and this truth has a religious quality, which ultimately has that sense of like there's only one truth. There is a bit of the extremism for the Gen Zs. I think it's still too early to say because they're still quite young. They may not be, we may not see the gentler side yet, but one of the things I do see for sure is that there is almost an extremism in the way they look at not religion per se, but their beliefs, what is right. And they can be quite
militant crusades.
Yeah. So Pluto in Sagittarius always reminds me of the Crusaders. It's that Crusader kind of energy, and there's only our job is to make sure that everyone gets converted in some way, right? And it may not be
we have a mutual friend that's willing to die on their chosen hill, and from an outside perspective, it looks like they are in a echo chamber of sorts. Like this set of beliefs sounds convenient, or it resonates very strongly with me, and therefore this is the be all end all, and I will die on this hill defending this. Yeah, so that's it taken to extremes lah.
I'm gonna be very honest and say that as a Sagittarius ascendant, I resonate. There was a period in my life when I believe so strongly in that thing that, you know, I would die for it. So it's that similar kind of thing. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the same, but I can resonate, right? So there's that sense of like dying for my truth, dying for you know, really going deep and all out, you know, with the truth that I hold, and there can be nothing but that truth.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I do have 2 planets in Sagittarius, but for me, because I'm overwhelmingly Scorpio, I'll be like, whenever that kind of like crusade is going on, I'll be like, yeah, cool story, bro. When's lunch? It's like I will disengage because ultimately it doesn't matter. What matters is my, you know, survival and things like that. Morality is all great, but what's this? There's this phrase from a Disney movie. Your morals rise as your tummy fills. Yeah, so it's a Keira Knightley movie. Anyway, but yeah,
Is it Pirates of the Caribbean?
No. It's Robin, Prince of Thieves, or something like that. But it's a Keira Knightley version. But that basically calls to mind the tension between Scorpio and Sagittarius, and one comes after the other.
Interesting. Yeah, and one of the things that we do see as we do some research, right, based on this article released by McKinsey.com, which I think is a market research firm. I'm not very sure actually.
Oh, dude.
Sorry, you are the expert on this. What are they?
It's one of the 3 biggest management consultancy firms in the world.
Yes. That means it's a good article. I find one. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Bain. So it's the short form is MBB.
So it's so that means it's very legit lah. So yeah, when I was reading the article, I was just like, wow, the way they talk about Gen Zs, the kind of like data they mine, right? I'm just like, wow, they're all so astrological. Like I can see it astrologically what's going on. I can see based on the placements. The Gen Z consume for the purpose of, you know, they buy stuff to support certain causes, to support certain truths that they have. You know, they think it's right. There's a rightness in them, which is a very Sagittarius conversation. Yep. You know, like I do this because it is right. I'm going to buy this because it is right, which is both a Sagittarius thing, and also I would argue as well, it's also there's also an Aquarius thing involved as well. And maybe with that, we should segue to the Neptune and Aquarius bit. So the Neptune Aquarius in Gen Z. So Neptune, like we say, is the energy of disappointment, the energy of the idealization, that sort of like transcendental idealization, that sense of like I will sacrifice myself for these ideals, kind of like energy, right? And with Neptune in Aquarius, this idealization is very much about people, very much about inclusivity, about people,
egalitarianism.
And they are very into those things. Like a lot of research that I've seen, that I've sort of like found, is that Gen Zs are more likely to be liberal leaning than to be conservative or to be like their forebears lah. They're more into the LGBTQ issues. They're more into environmental issues. I mean, even Greta Thunberg himself is a Gen Z, right?
Herself,
right?
Yeah. But I think just to add additional clarity around it, they are more willing to engage on these issues. I don't think, this is where I disagree and drift apart a little bit. I don't think that they are necessarily left-leaning, but I think they're more willing to engage on these issues on opposite ends of the spectrum. So
actually you're right. I want to chime in on this. I think you're right, because I have seen Gen Zs who are incredibly conservative in the way they look at certain things.
There has to be a balance, right? There will be cosmic balance. When there is one end of the spectrum that's heavier, the other end will naturally solidify as well. So if everyone that we are hearing on popular media is left-leaning, then there is an equal and opposite force on the right as well.
Yeah. Aquarius is a very interesting sign. I used to think that Aquarius, is very utopic in the vision and all that, right? But I recently started to realize that Aquarius can be incredibly conservative as well, because at the end of the day, what Aquarius cares about as a sign, it cares about inclusion. Left-leaning Aquarius, we get it, right? It's about like, I want to be included with the bigger conversation. I want to include other people in the bigger conversation, right? But there's also the more right and conservative leaning Aquarius type, which is very much about how like, okay, whatever is it that you bring to the table, to include that would threaten the integrity of the group. And that's when the flip side, the more conservative side of Aquarius comes in, where they can be quite hardcore about blocking people out, certain beliefs that they don't adhere to, that they don't want to include, they will block it out, right? So there is a bit of that. So the Neptune in Aquarius conversation has the idealization around the idea of inclusivity and inclusion. And that's why, we see my Gen Z students, going to LGBTQ rally, doing a lot of like, caring about environment. And one of our Gen Z friends also cares about the environment, and yeah, so I think there's a bit of that, and I think that's also the reason why they are more willing to explore K-pop, even Thai Netflix series, that sort of thing, because the world, for the Aquarian worldview, the world is diverse. There's no central locus of power, whereas for the millennials, like the two of us, right, there's still that sense of like order and that sense of like hierarchical power structure, right? But for the Gen Zs, it's a little bit different,
I think how this plays out in the workplace, again, coming back, is our definitions of success is very much vertical. By X number of years, you become a manager, you draw a certain amount of salary, and that is successful. We contrast that with Generation X, where you buy a house by a certain age, you get married, you have children. So it's very predefined and very clear-cut, similar to ours. Whereas right now, that success is not necessarily vertical, it is also horizontal. You can be a specialist, you don't have to be a manager. And because our career structures have glorified people management as being successful, we have seen a lot of toxic managers rise into that position, sometimes because they generally are toxic, and sometimes because I'm good at what I do, but therefore I become a people manager, which has absolutely no links at all. Whereas
I have so many things to talk about that, like how like for like a normal hierarchical structure, but the way we promote people is that you are good at the particular content that you do, right? You are a good teacher, and therefore I promote you to be a head teacher, to manage other teachers. But actually, none of our job has prepared us to manage people, right? Which is a really, really interesting data point about where the current power hierarchy prioritize when it comes to people and what they care about. They care about, there's still that sense of traditional sense of like hierarchical kind of structure. It's still about the content. It's never really about the people management, the people process, which then, harks back to episode 2, like where we talk about how it's getting more and more important to move into being very people-centered and really to figure out how to manage people, it's not about managing them, it's really about how to listen to them, how do you work with them, right? Which I think, therefore, is what the Gen Zs will be very good at.
So, fun fact, did you know that we are recording this in the shadow period of Mercury Retrograde?
No, Mercury Retrograde, no!
So you might have heard of Mercury Retrograde and you're probably wondering what is it all about. There's a lot of pop and meme astrology going around, and there's like that says Mercury in retrograde is the end of the world. Don't travel, don't buy electronics, don't sign contractual agreements and things like that. But what exactly is Mercury retrograde? By the time this episode is released, I think it will be right smack in the middle of the actual retrograde. Yeah, so if you're listening to this, look up, and that's Mercury going in reverse. Okay, you want to explain what retrograde is, or Mercury retrograde is?
So Mercury retrograde is essentially the appearance of Mercury moving backwards, ghost stunning, like doing a ghost stun, right? It's an illusion. It's not real. Mercury doesn't actually move backwards. It just appears to be retrograde, right? But that is because of the way astrology works, which is very much about the relative positions of the planets vis-a-vis Earth. it would generate some impact on all of us. I mean, even though we like to joke about how Mercury retrograde is not the end of the world. I don't know about Cliff, but I'm secretly quite afraid of Mercury retrograde. Like I'm really very careful. I'm very careful on whatever event I plan. If I want to sell something, I want to sell a course, I want to sell I want to do like a publicity. I want to make sure that I don't do it like when Mercury is in retrograde. Like right now, I'm preparing to go London. I'm a bit like scared about what if I get a tickets too late and and then Mercury goes retrograde and then my London plan gets screwed up. I'm also preparing to go Netherlands as well because I want to do some spiritual retreat and I haven't made like commitments to that, so I'm getting a little bit like finicky, and a little bit worried about that. I guess we'll get to that at one point in time, at some point in time, in our podcast. But maybe I'll just name it out there right now. Don't everything also blame retrograde lah, huh? If when you're blaming the retrograde, when you're blaming like what's happening in the sky, you're taking responsibility from yourself, which is what else can you do? How can you be responsible for the cock ups and the screw ups that's coming in for you during this period?
The funny thing is I've stopped tracking planetary movements already on a day-to-day basis. It's only like when I get reminded by fellow astrologers that, hey, Mercury is retrograding, Venus is retrograding, then I actually pay attention. But by and large, because I personally have a Mercury retrograde in my natal chart, that means I was born when Mercury was going backwards. It's as if I'm always under Mercury retrograde anyway. But I think to summarize, from my perspective, Mercury retrograde, if we look at the textbook definition, it creates a time where you are a lot more deliberative, you're a lot more analytical, whether or not successfully analytical or just running down rabbit holes, that remains to be seen. And because Mercury is closely related to communications, the act of communicating, therefore technology that assists with communicating tends to require greater scrutiny. So that's why your pop astrology tells you to double check your contracts, your electronics, your flight tickets and things like that. But I mean, that's a very easy way to understand retrogrades. Another way also, it's also important to really look at your personal chart. Just because one planet is going in one direction or the other doesn't mean the entire planet shuts down. If it happens in a particular area of life, then that's where you tend to find yourself focusing more mental energy on. That's just another way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's not just communication, it's also the act of connecting essentially gets haywire, because like sometimes I do find that, like, let's say, for example, I'm already late for XYZ events, and Mercury is retrograding. What happens is that I will take the wrong bus somehow, or the bus that I'm on, that I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna be late already. The bus that I'm on break down, this sort of thing. So yeah, it also sort of attends to commuting as well. The act of anything that connects from one end to the other gets frayed in some way. And I just want to comment that actually you don't sound like you have Mercury retrograde in your chart. You sound quite lucid lah.
I guess we learn to live with our charts and use it to our advantage lah.
No, because I have met people with Mercury retrograde that really behaves like their chart, they have Mercury on retrograde all the time. I think perhaps like it's the judiciousness of all your other planets lah.
Oh, another important note is that Mercury retrogrades happen between 3 to 4 times a year, so it's actually quite common. It's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world. Yeah, it's usually a bigger deal when it triggers existing big shifts in your life.
This particular retrograde is interesting because it conjuncts, or it hits directly the part of my chart that governs my career and public identity, my MC. So stay tuned. I fingers crossed. It's good news. We'll find out at the end of the retrograde. Yeah, so I'll update everyone in the next episode, how this whole retrograde across my career area of the chart looks like. But to expand on that and to let you know if this retrograde affects you in any significant way, it's retrograding, or the whole shebang is happening in the signs of Taurus and Gemini. What are the exact degrees again?
Late degrees Taurus, so 25 to 29 degrees Taurus and 0 to 5 degrees Gemini.
Okay, so 25 to 0, 25
yeah,
to 29, 0 to
0 to
9.
5.
0 to 5 degrees
Yeah.
Gemini, yep.
Yeah, so it's actually very, I find those are very narrow, very obscure degrees. So, unless you're born in the last few days of Taurus and the early few days of Gemini, then you confirm kena lah. But if you're not, then probably, just consult. Maybe just consult us, and maybe we can talk to you about it.
So check the area of your chart, like grab one of our chart generators and generate your chart on our websites, and then look for the area of the chart of the circle where there is the sign of Taurus and there's the sign of Gemini where it meets. That is where you would find yourself committing more mental resources to during this period of time, throughout the month of May lah. For ease of calculations.
Yeah, and a bit of June as well. I also want to just end off by sort of just adding that, Mercury retrograde is always the best time to journal. I find that I journal more productively when Mercury is retrograding. For some reason, maybe it's the whole like moving inwards kind of thing. So if all else fails, journal and figure stuff out through the journaling.
Wow. Okay. So that's quite a long episode. Thank you all for spending time with us. We hope to hear from you. How are you experiencing this Mercury retrograde? Leave a comment, drop us a DM. We'd love to hear how you're dealing. And let us know what you'd like to hear us discuss. We've got a couple more episodes left on this season, and we'll try and incorporate those ideas as well. If not, this is Cliff and Gabriel. And we're going to be signing off. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.